pledge allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, next up is roll call. Ms. Schluto, could you please call the roll?
Commissioner Buckler?
Here.
Commissioner Campbell?
Here.
Commissioner Kempner?
Here.
Commissioner Murad?
Here.
Commissioner Patterson?
Here.
Commissioner Richardson?
Here.
Vice Chair Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Trotto?
Here.
Chair Kapolansky?
Here. Thank you. Next up, approval of the agenda. Any modifications or additions to the agenda or motions to approve?
Motion to approve. Second.
Ms. Schluto?
Campbell?
Yes.
Kempner?
Yes.
Murad?
Yes.
Patterson?
Yes.
Richardson?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Trotto?
Yes.
Buckler?
Yes.
Kapolansky?
Yes. Next on the agenda is approval of the September 24th minutes. Any changes or additions or motions?
Move to approve.
Second.
Ms. Schluto?
Kempner?
Yes.
Murad?
Yes.
Patterson?
Yes.
Richardson?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
Trotto?
Yes.
Buckler?
Yes.
Campbell?
Yes.
Kapolansky?
Yes. All right, next is communications. We had several items this evening. One was an invitation to the grand opening of the MSU Federal Credit Union. So we'll all note that. And then the other two items, one had to do with one of the agenda items this evening, the marijuana ordinance. So we received an email addressing the library and the properties around that as being part of the green zone. So we'll add that to the record, and maybe we can discuss that a little further when that's considered later in the agenda. And the second item was Carlisle Wortman's review of the downtown master plan, which I believe was requested by the Planning Commission. So I haven't had a chance to read through the entire thing, but maybe you could give us a brief summary when we get to talking about the Master Plan Steering Committee. And there were no other communications, correct? Okay, next up we have citizen comment. Any citizens that have comments for items not on the agenda, please come forward at this time. There is a sign-in sheet provided by Councilmember Gavin, so if you could please sign in there. As a reminder, we will not engage you in discussion. We ask you to keep your comments to 4 minutes or less and to state your name and address. Anyone that wants to comment? Okay, we will close citizen comments then and move on to our regular business items. The first item, kind of all grouped together, 1, 2, and 3, is a public hearing, special land use and site plan for a proposed child care. Ms. Schluto, do you want to give us a brief overview of that?
Yes. The applicant, 814 LLC, is proposing to occupy a portion of the first floor of an existing office building located at 1695 12 Mile Road. It's at the southwest corner of 12 Mile and Brookline. This proposed kinder care will provide daytime care for up to 124 children, ranging from infants from pre-kindergarten age groups. This will be a proposed redevelopment of an existing facility. Currently, the building is being used for medical offices on the second floor. Those medical offices will continue, and the kinder care will occupy a portion of the first floor. The remaining portion of the first floor will be for the 814 LLC, which is going to be moving their developmental office from Troy into Berkley. The subject site is zoned office district. This property, daycare facilities are now permitted as a special land use in the office district per the revision of the ordinance districts that had previously been reviewed by the Planning Commission, recommended by the Planning Commission, and adopted by the City Council.
All set?
Yeah.
Thank you. Does the applicant want to make a brief presentation?
Thank you. Good evening, Planning Commissioners. We're excited to bring this opportunity to the City of Berkley. We've worked with KinderCare over the last several years, developing several sites throughout the country. They are a first-class operation. As I've indicated, we've done several sites with them, and we believe this will be an asset to the community. So we'd welcome the opportunity to be here and answer any questions you may have or that may come up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So this item is a special land use consideration and does require a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to comment on this item? Please come up to the microphone, state your name and address, and try to keep your comments to 4 minutes or less. If you have any questions, we'll address those at the end of the public comment.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Maria Ward. I live at 1838 Rosemont. My property abuts the property in question. Although I'm not directly behind the building, my property does abut the parking area. I guess when I got the notice that there was going to be a public hearing, I was very surprised. We are in the backyard of Beaumont Hospital, and I am very surprised that there is not a need for office space, medical office space, and why there is a building that has been an office, a medical office building, is now being converted to child care or daycare. I think that something like that would be best suited around a school or a church rather than in such a busy area as 12 Mile and this particular location. I just wonder how many of the medical offices will stay once the kinder care development is in place. I don't think it's a great idea to bring children into a building where you have patients coming in on the second floor that may have some type of infection, disease, whatever. And I know that there is counseling that is done in the building, but I'm just very surprised that we're here tonight and that we're looking at creating a daycare facility in a building that has been used for the last 30 years for a medical office space. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on this item? And we received no correspondence, is that correct?
No, none.
So I'll close the public hearing then, since there's no additional comments, and open it up to the Planning Commission for discussion of the special land use and site plan. Anyone?
Are we discussing both at the same time?
I think we can.
So I have to open my plan?
Sorry.
Just to briefly address Ms. Ward, I believe it was, Ms. Ward's comments. So this is a use that we recently added to the office district, the daycare facilities. It's fairly common, I think, for the daycare facilities to be included in office districts because they are there to serve the needs of the employees that are dropping their children off, and I think that was one of the considerations that we were looking at. We did want to make it a special land use because it can have impacts on the surrounding properties. So we definitely wanted to make sure that we had that discretion and the ability to add additional conditions if we need to. So that's definitely one of the things we'll take up as part of the special land use consideration. Okay, yep, we have closed the public hearing, so the time for public comment has passed, but if you wanted to touch base with Ms. Schluto after the meeting or with myself, we'd be happy to answer those questions. But we will, I don't want to get in a dialogue back and forth because we kind of have a standard meeting procedure that we follow here. If you have some questions, if you wanted to write those down quickly and give them to Ms. Schluto, perhaps we can get them into the discussion here as far as site design or things like that. But otherwise, the point for public comment has passed. Who would like to start? Anyone? Ms.
I
Buckler?
I just have a point of order. We have this as two separate items, the special land use public hearing and then the site plan. So the reality is, when we discuss the site plan, there is an opportunity for public comment on that item on the agenda that is not part of the public hearing, but it would have to be items related to the actual plan itself. That would be an opportunity for the public to comment and,
Correct.
Okay.
I kind of intended to discuss them as one item, because when we tend to get into the special land uses, then we sort of get into the site design, and it ends up being one big.
I understand, but we have it as separate items on the agenda, and we've told the public that they can't, I don't want to get parse words, but we've told them that if it's on the agenda, then, they can't
That's-
comment on the front. So the special land use is one item. It would have to be items related to the site plan and not the appropriateness of it being there. It would have to be some technical elements, the comments on like the driveway or the building height or.
Right, that's a fair point. I'd still like to discuss them as one item, but Ms. Ward, given that point, if you wanted to come up and make your comments now on the site plan, since it was listed as a separate agenda item.
The questions that I had is, where is the outdoor space going to be for the daycare center? And is that area going to be gated? And will we be losing, or will the building be losing parking spaces?
Okay, thank you. Anyone else that wants to comment on the site plan? Okay. All right, Planning Commission.
Well, may I?
Yes, Mr. Richardson?
I guess to follow up on a point raised about the play areas, they will be to the rear of the building. I would invite the applicant to comment on fencing and security in those areas. But I do have a question too. We're allocating 3,700 square feet for the 2,200 square feet for the toddlers, infants. And I'm uncertain how many children will be occupying those spaces, or if they'll be occupying them all at one time. And I'd like to know if state regulations exist pertaining to the subject that we're talking about here, the outdoor play areas, and the sufficiency of the space
Yes.
provided.
To answer your question, they are not occupying the outdoor play area all at one time. They have a rotation. They'll take classrooms out at a given time to occupy the play areas. So they won't be occupying the play area. The entire enrollment would not be out there at one time. They are fenced. The play areas are fenced. They are gated, both for access into the building and exit. Again, with fire code, you have to provide an emergency outlet. Pardon me, the other question, as far as state regulation, they do review the playgrounds and the play structures and anything in there as part of the licensing.
And the fencing and security arrangements?
Correct. Yep, they will look at that.
Okay. And the capacity versus the
Correct.
enrollment?
The KinderCare they have a separate division that handles all of the licensing through the state of Michigan.
Thank you.
Yep.
Ms. Schluto, do you want to comment on the parking question that was brought up, whether or not this site will be sufficiently parked?
Yes, I'd be happy to. The property at 1695 has 121 spaces on site and has entered into an agreement with the property owners at 194 12 Mile for the use of 67 parking spaces. Given the three uses of the building, medical, office, and daycare facility, that is a requirement of 185 parking spaces, and with the 121-67, that's 188. So they do meet the parking requirements. There was a question about 1949 and if they're using a shared parking, if they have sufficient with their building, and they have 24 spaces of their own located to the east of their building, and about 38 spaces to the west of their building, not included any of the shared that they would be using with the 1695. And based on their square footage and their requirement for medical office, they do meet their requirements as well.
Great, thank you. Mr. Smith?
Is this the shared parking agreement?
Yes, it is.
Looks a lot like the one I looked at 20 years ago, when they built, was it 1949?
1949, yes.
1949, I gotta write that down. Okay, it is 20 years old, and I obviously don't remember. I think it was my first or second meeting. Ago. Don't ask me what we talked about last meeting. It seems to me they had a shared parking agreement in 1949 with the American Legion building.
If they did, it would be on the other side of their building.
Understand.
Yeah.
So I'd like to know if well, first of all, there's a couple pages in here that have Dutton Road on them. I don't know if that's up in Oakland Township.
Auburn Hills, yeah.
Oakland Township and Rochester Hills, actually. So those probably don't belong in here. But has our city attorney, since you're here tonight, had a chance to look at this and make sure? I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but the language, as I read it, seemed to me they are entering into one. It sounds like they've had it for 20 years. I just want to make sure it's the...
I have not reviewed.
I have not, no.
We'll make that a condition then, that it is reviewed.
This is an existing agreement.
Okay, it is the existing
Yes.
agreement. Okay, the language kind of alluded to that.
Well, it
They are
looks,
entering into.
if I may, it looks as if it's recorded. If
Yeah.
it's a recorded reciprocal easement, it's going to run with the land. It
Absolutely.
doesn't matter who
Right.
occupies the
I
building.
just want to make sure, because the language said they are entering into one, from what I read. So this is the same agreement. Okay, that shouldn't be a problem. If you would.
Absolutely.
Where's the main entrance?
So there are going to be two entrances for the most part. The general medical office and office uses will generally use the western entrance, what is now the kind of front entrance, if you will, with the portico or canopy. We've worked on layouts with KinderCare for the use of their space, and they want to look at an entry while providing an auxiliary entry on the front, but they'd like another entry that would be exclusive to the KinderCare use on that side.
On
So
which side?
Which side
on
is
the,
that?
what would be the south side of the
Okay,
building, adjacent to the playground there, you'll see there's
Is
a
that the
a
first one?
doorway. Yes.
Okay.
So in that L, in the inner part of that. So that would be for KinderCare. Exclusive, we would secure a door. Obviously, we'll work this through on the building plan and with the fire department, but there would be a coded door on the inside that would allow them into that vestibule space, but they would have secured access from that southern lot as well.
Okay.
It also plays into the play area so that they're kind of separated off and they can be self-contained in that area.
So that is really the main entry.
That's the main entrance. Again, there's 8 parallel parking spaces there, so we obviously saw that there could be a need for additional parking, and if there were, they would be able to go to the main parking lot, come in through that door, and then enter in through the main lobby with a key card or code, access code, through that doorway.
Do you, much like an issue we have with our local schools, and we're not alone, most communities do, where everybody drives their minivan and drops the kids off at school. I imagine you have quite a lineup. I mean, it's not like a school where it's set at 8:30 as a start time.
Correct.
It's more of a staggered, but do
Much
you...
more staggered.
Yes.
We don't anticipate any stacking or parking issue. KinderCare does require parents to bring the children in and sign in, so it's not a rolling drop-off where they're pulling up, letting kids out, or there's things going on. So there's really no need or desire to stack, if you will. They're going to find those parking spaces, yes. We vetted this very completely with KinderCare to make sure that they were comfortable based on their years of use, that those 8 parallel spaces and then the auxiliary parking in the front would accommodate. They don't see any issue with the layout and the proposed function of the parking.
Okay. You know, I drove the site this evening, and I forgot to look of the other things. And of course, I went east instead of the one-way west, but we're planning commissioners, we can do that. I didn't notice any site lighting along the back there. There must be something, because there's existing parking there now.
Yes, I believe there is.
The door here. Are you making any changes to the lighting?
We're going to look at the lighting, and I think that was one of the items that was brought up during site review, so we're going to look at that, and we'll work with staff to create a photometric that, however it goes, but lighting is something that we're looking at a potential upgrade.
Right, okay, because, yeah, we will want to see that, maybe staff can review it.
Absolutely, that
But
would be
especially with the existing neighbors, there's 3 houses or 4 houses.
For sure.
Directly affected by this, be shielded and all that.
100%, yep. We would abide by typical lighting standards where we won't have light trespass, and we'll direct it appropriately.
And the dumpsters being removed from the middle of the south to the very east end.
Yes.
Okay. And you have dumpsters details here and everything.
We've looked at a variety, just to touch on the dumpster, we've looked at a variety of locations. This is the most accessible, easily, and still screened location, so it's a little bit different, but we can dress up we'll do the enclosure with brick that matches the building. We'll do a nice gate. We'll do landscaping as was identified in the review memo. So we believe that we can make this an improvement over what exists. Yep.
The parking lot on this site, mostly to the west here, is in pretty bad shape. And you're a tenant in the building, right?
We actually own the building.
Oh, you do own the
Yep.
building. Okay.
We are,
Is there any,
we are planning to make some improvements to the
Okay.
property. We've looked at, and we actually discussed with the planning department, or community development department, about making improvements. We've, right now, pending the outcome of what would happen here, we've patched and made improvements to get us through for now, knowing that this would come, or hoping that this would come, so that we could make complete improvements.
yeah, it's almost to the point of, it's lived its life.
Yeah. We are looking at just picking it up and kind of laying a new asphalt.
And I noticed the wall's in generally good shape. There's one section at the existing location of the dumpster where it's
Yeah.
obviously beat up, but
That will be taken care of. Yes.
Okay. Let's see. Now, I know there's all kinds of licensing requirements for the access into the building from the outside. And the fire marshal talked a little bit about egress. And again, we're not, as this body isn't concerned too much with the interior, but I want to bring this up. Egress is important. Also, with the stairways, are those, you're on the lower level, and there's 2 floors above you, or above this part of the facility?
There's a floor.
Sorry, one more floor?
Yep, it's just 2-story. Actually, 1.5 stories, because the first level is a little recessed.
Oh, really? I thought it was, okay.
Garden level,
Whatever.
if you will.
I was looking at the wall. There'll be some locking arrangement at the upper floor so people cannot get down into
The KinderCare
the
space.
KinderCare space?
Correct.
Whether it's a delay or a alarmed lock, whatever.
Yep.
Much like, okay, that's all part of the,
For sure.
that's all part of the LARA.
Yep, they would be secured unto themselves. Emergency access would not be restricted from that standpoint. We will provide the suitable and code-required access for the second floor as well.
And there's some mention about signage. You're not quite there yet, but
We aren't, again, looking at KinderCare and what we can do. It's called the Berkley Medical Building right now. we may look at doing that. We're also moving our office in here, as I think it was
Are
included
you
in
going to
the
take up the
memo.
whole second floor?
We are going to complete out the first floor, and we have existing tenants with existing leases on the second floor, so we're going to honor those and work through the terms of the existing leases.
Okay. I don't have any real issues with this, other than when it comes time to photometrics, really respect your neighbors to the south.
Oh, for sure.
And that's always an issue. And again, this is a small paved area, but the lights could be aimed to the north, shielded at the
Yep.
wall. And it's not, you don't need it's not a vast parking lot along the
No,
back
it's
here,
a,
so.
it's a small ancillary parking lot there on the south side. So again, I don't think much lighting would be needed, and it wouldn't be directed toward the residential
Okay.
properties whatsoever.
Okay, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Anyone else? Mr. Richardson?
I have a procedural question. You have not secured any state licensure yet? is that-
No,
Okay, should we make both of our approvals contingent on receipt of the appropriate state licenses?
Ms. Schluto, I assume they can't get their C of O until we have that state license in hand?
Correct.
I don't think that
We-
concerns us.
Yeah, I don't think it would hurt anything, but,
Well, I'm just asking, I'm not,
yeah, they won't be able to occupy the building unless they have the state license, so I think we're covered.
okay.
Any other comments? Do you want to talk a little bit about the landscaping and what you've talked about maybe with the staff?
yeah, we haven't gotten too much into landscaping. We've looked at a little bit of it. We would like to clean up what's there. A little bit of what there is overgrown or hasn't been manicured, I'll say. It's a nice building, so we'd like to show that off a little bit. So we'd be happy to produce a landscape plan that shows some treatments in front and kind of cleaning that up so that we can show off the building a little bit better. Also, it was mentioned in the memo as far as adding landscaping into the parking lot. We'd be happy to work together on something. There's a few extra parking spaces that are in there, and so maybe reconfiguring some of that. I know it mentioned coming back with a parking plan that kind of outlines the striping and the directional, so we can work together on that as well. We're not opposed to trying to do that. As far as the greenbelt along 12 Mile, we will try to work that out. I'm not sure. I think that right-of-way, I think the parking lot comes right up to the right-of-way. We were looking at it as being able to take out where those parking blocks are, and there's a little bit of room on what's kind of asphalted up to that sidewalk. So we had considered trying to do some type of green belt. We need to identify exactly where that property line is and what we can do. We wouldn't be opposed to be able to plant some street trees or whatever would work in that area. But we want to make sure that works with the parking and we're not kind of throwing out that entire parking lot because it is a little bit tight, as you've seen when you've driven through it, so.
Yeah, anything you could do to kind of green that up, I think would be much appreciated. That's a big expanse of pavement.
Absolutely, yep. We'd like to break it up, and there's a natural line between the two parcels because that Berkley, or the Beaumont, former Beaumont building is owners of that other property. So we can try to work something out, or we can keep it on the western end and try to block it up, or break it up into two different sections.
Okay.
I have a question. Who's responsible for the sidewalks along that area?
The maintenance of them, like snow removal or patching?
Oh,
or?
I'm just looking at the sidewalks and the divide between their parking lot and the sidewalk, and it's just destroyed. I mean, the puddles over here are massive, and just looking at the streetscape, it looks like a lot of their asphalt's literally washing onto the sidewalk.
The parking lot asphalt?
So I'm sure that you have repairs in there for that area, but I'm just saying that something needs to be done to divide the parking lot from the sidewalk.
Are there curbs there right now?
It's all bumper block.
Yeah.
So we're looking at, like I say, we looked at the opportunity to create some type of curbed area or a green belt, even if it were a green belt that allowed that water to flow into it from a natural standpoint and let it settle. But we will look at that The sidewalk itself is within that 12-mile right-of-way.
Where does the stormwater go right now? Does it
There's
just?
catch basins on site.
There are? Okay.
Yep. One of the comments from DPW was to include the restricted covers. We have no problem doing that.
Okay. That's good to hear.
Just want to see.
Other comments, questions? No?
That was my concern, is the site quality of the parking lot is in very, very poor shape.
We'll be addressing that.
Yep, so this is a good opportunity to take care of all those outstanding issues.
Absolutely. And we wanted to come here to see how this was going to work out, so we knew what we had to work with.
And one more question here.
Yes.
This is kind of foreshadowing into one of our future topics of the night. How would this apply to the marijuana no-go situation?
Now,
In the office, if I may, in the office district, because the way that it was originally written, marijuana retail uses are not permitted in the office district, so they would not be permitted in this, at this facility.
It's changed.
that is a change,
Right here,
yeah.
anyway. Okay, so it's in the no-go zone? Okay.
Yeah, it's too close to the school.
I mean, technically, shouldn't we address the fact that child care facilities should be somewhat regulated in that situation?
So we can talk about it more when we get to the marijuana, but that was one of the comments I brought up when we first started talking about this. And I think the response was that childcare facilities were purposefully excluded. Is that correct, Ms. Schluto?
Yes, that is correct.
And what was the reasoning behind that again? Because they were more transitory potentially?
Yeah, the reasoning that was addressed at the previous meeting was the fact that many of these daycare facilities can come and go quite frequently. Therefore, it wasn't going to have quite as a permanent presence in a community such as a school.
Yeah, I thought I had the same line of thinking, but
Okay. I mean, this is fine right now. It's in a no-go zone, so. Clear.
It is right now, yeah.
Right.
comments, questions, motions?
I'll make a motion.
Okay,
Gotta find it.
Are we making two motions, or is it the same?
two motions.
Do we need two?
Two motions, special land use and site plan.
Okay, make a motion. A special land use, are we recommending, or is that a motion?
We are a motion to recommend approval if that's what you
City
desire.
council, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I make, for item 2, special land use PSU 0119, make a motion to recommend approval to city council.
Second.
Comments or additions? Ms. Schluto?
Patterson,
Yes.
Richardson,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Trotto,
Yes.
Buckler,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Kempner,
Yes.
Murad,
Yes.
Kapelansky.
Yes. Site plan?
Want me to keep going?
Sure.
Okay, item 3, site plan, PSP 0719. I'd make a motion to approve the site plan with a couple items. We would like to see and I'm not sure how to word this, a plan to repair. I'm not going to make it contingent on repairing the parking lot and the paving, but I think we'd like to see a plan that is going to be taken care of.
So the conditions suggested by staff said improved conditions of parking area. Do you want to make it more than that?
Whatever that means, I don't know what that
Yeah.
means. Improve is, could be patching it. We'd like to see it at some point, a plan.
You want to see a site plan here in front of us?
No, I don't think we need to see it, but, no, I don't mean a plan. I mean a procedure or a calendar when they believe they will get this, because it needs to be addressed. It's in very poor shape now.
May I suggest something?
Please.
Contingent on submission of a plan for approval of the parking area that's acceptable to city staff? That work?
Well, that goes hand in hand. There's landscaping involved, and when you say parking area, maybe for the building permit, they're going to outfit this. I want to see I don't want to say they have to repave the parking before they can get their permit, but I think it has to be something acceptable to staff, that it's not something that's 20 years out.
Yeah.
It's something that's, they have a plan of how to, when they plan to repair this. Could be next year, could be 2 or 3 years, but it can't linger on.
Yep.
We're not going to tell them they have to repair the parking lot. I don't want to do that unless someone else wants to.
Well, what if you are?
You can't have it both ways.
You are telling them, you're just telling them they
No,
don't.
no, no, I don't want to, I don't want it to be tomorrow. I just want a reasonable date, a reasonable plan of action to get the parking lot repaired.
That doesn't come in front of us, so it should be
I know.
acceptable to the city staff.
Right. So,
All right.
photometrics will come to city staff. And if they have questions, they can always come to us. And then we talked about adding the landscaping, specifically around the dumpster on the east end, and then look at, I don't know what they can do on the parking lot. There's no space between the parking and the sidewalk, but
They can look at it.
they can look at it to staff. Signage is a separate issue, permit. I think that's it.
So there were 2 other items that staff suggested, the painted direction arrows to signal one-way maneuvering, and
Well, there's signage up there already. If they want it painted, that's fine.
then the DPW and fire marshal review and
Of
approval.
course, there are, yes, okay, I guess that goes without saying, they have to
Yeah.
abide by those comments. I was after a concise,
Sounds like one of mine. I'll second.
Direct council just to send it right back to us, right?
not for the site plan.
So that's a motion and a second. Any comments? Ms. Shuto, could you call the roll, please?
Richardson,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes,
Trotto,
Yes.
Buckler,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Kepner,
Yes.
Murad,
Yes.
Patterson,
Yes.
Kaplansky.
Yes. All right.
Thank you very
sir.
much.
Good luck.
good luck.
Look forward to working with you. Thank you.
All right, now we move on to the discussion items, and the first up is the review and discussion of the marijuana businesses ordinance, which we thought we were done with,
Yes,
but it's back.
it is.
So do you want to tell us about that?
So at our September 24th meeting, the Planning Commission made a recommendation to an ordinance amendment to permit marijuana businesses by special land use to the City Council. The City Council reviewed the recommendation by the Planning Commission and heard the concerns regarding the public notice component that the Planning Commission had articulated in their meeting, and had made some additional recommendations regarding permitting marijuana businesses strictly as a retail business and a medical provisioning center rather than the other businesses that we had proposed. So based on the City Council's recommendations and determinations, we decided to bring it back to the Planning Commission, kind of start over from the very beginning with the zoning component, and that is what's before you. So if we would go through, we are permitting them by principal use in the industrial, local business, downtown districts, Gateway District, the Coolidge District, 12-mile district, 11-mile district. We have eliminated the office district, as I had mentioned previously, and Woodward has been excluded from this primarily for the reason that within the local business district, any use that is permitted by principal use is thereby right also permitted in the Woodward district. So we just eliminated that as a redundancy. In the marijuana business regulations, section 138-528, we have included subsection E to include a requirement for public notice outlined in section 30-904, that is the regulatory framework and the licensing framework in the Code of Ordinances, as well as a requirement that any business license or application has to achieve site plan approval from the Planning Commission prior to receiving their license.
Just a quick question on the public notice. So the public notice would be a notice of the city council meeting, not of the planning commission consideration. Is that correct?
Correct. So it would be a public notice for the licensing, and site plan approval would be done after that.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Sarin, do you want to add anything right now or stand by for questions?
Well, I can do both. I think Director Schluto covered things pretty well. And part of the reason it's coming back to you is not because anybody thinks you don't have enough to do or that we didn't beat this horse enough, but it's an important ordinance. I mean, this is a new use to the community, and at least as far as the zoning, part of it goes, you know, we're seeing from other communities, there's, I'm not wishing it on us, but there is a chance, maybe even a likelihood, we could end up having to defend this ordinance and decisions made under this ordinance in court. So I think it's absolutely essential that we make sure and doubly sure that we followed all the procedural requirements and niceties, which is why it's, you know, it's coming back to you. And if you were satisfied with the form of it, you know, the next step would be for the Planning Commission to hold another public hearing on this before it goes back to the City Council. We would much rather take the appropriate amount of time and the cautious approach rather than try to rush something through and just creating procedural defects or things that we might have overlooked that will come back to haunt us.
Thanks. Would anyone in the audience like to comment on this item? No? Okay, then I'll open it to the Planning Commission.
You know I want to go, Madam Chair. Madam Chair.
Yes, Ms.
All right,
Berkley.
so I have a couple of items that I wrote down while I was reviewing this, and I reviewed it again, and I wrote down a couple of items. Number one, and these questions are probably for council more so than for Michelle. Does the idea of being a principal use conflict with the limit of licenses that will be issued? So
That might be a question for Mr. Starin.
that's what I said for council. I meant city council, legal council.
Got it.
So
Also with an E, not with an I.
the idea that if it's a principal use,
No, it doesn't conflict. I mean, we are creating principal use, but we're also at the same time putting a cap on it. So
we do that to any other business.
Yes, we do. Liquor licenses, for one.
Okay.
That's probably the prime thing. I'm trying to think of what other licensed businesses that we would have in this city.
But the state determines the number of those based on population density, correct?
Well, the state, there's a formula as far as liquor licenses, and it's based on population density. But the decision whether to issue those licenses to the fullest extent or not at all is entirely a local decision.
Okay, very good. Then I have an section 30-903, item 2, and then item number 4, item number 2. We say that all ownership, indirect or indirect, should be listed, excluding those with less than 10%. I think it should be all owners, because some of these businesses could be very profitable, and 5% ownership could matter, and
Those
we should know.
definitions were lifted word for word from the state law.
I understand, but we can be more
and we're-
strict.
Well, we just recognize, yes, we can. I think it was an attempt by the state legislatures to try to, well, I was going to say weed out, poor choice of words, but to not necessarily include owners who don't have a substantial stake in it or ownership. Can we add more? Yes, we can. But that's the reason why it reads the way it does, is we are mimicking the definitions and the application requirements from the state law for state licensing.
So here's my concern, is you have a 51%, and then you have a bunch of 9% owners, or 9% owners, or 55% and 9% owners. And I would want to know if any of those were my local city council. I would like to know if they're on the planning commission. I'd like to know if they're you. And 9% of what could be a lucrative business is still lucrative, and I think the public has a right to know, and I don't think it's unreasonable. I don't think you're going to have 1% ownerships of these unless you have some kind of co-op situation, which I don't know if that allows. So I just, that's
Right.
certainly up to the people, and I think it should be crystal clear who owns these.
Understood.
Okay, that's just my opinion. And then, so section 3090, item number 4, and item number 5. So this is in the license application evaluation. So yeah, 30-904, so page 8, or page 9, items number 4 and 5. These are items that typically the Planning Commission deals with. So my question is, it's going to be part of the evaluation process for the license. The license is going to go before City Council for approval, and then it's going to come to us for site plan. But you've already done our job for 2 of these items, and let me finish. And then, what if we make a decision on some item that affects it? Does that change the scorecard that changes their point value, that puts them now down below somebody who might have had a higher value? I brought this up the last time. There's a very circuitous situation, and I really think it looks better, but I think somebody has to walk through the actual process. Like, you develop it, and you walk through, and you go to the what ifs, and you're like, okay, now we go here. And then you have a little mock situation, and then now we go here. But this is, I feel like this is one of those conflicts that could arise.
Understood.
And I don't know how much the city's law larder holds for fees for all of these things to defend them, but this definitely falls in our purview, and I just need to bring it forth.
So how much input, was that all you had, Ms. Wilker? Okay, so kind of following up on that, because I think that's a fair point. It could go both ways, right? We could have them come here and we could look at the site plan and suggest something, and maybe now their traffic circulation patterns are better, and should they have been awarded more points, and et cetera, et cetera. Is staff reviewing the site plans before they're looked at as part of the licensing application?
Yes.
Okay, so all those reviews will be done. If there's traffic improvements that could be made, or things where it's not in compliance with the master plan, that would all be commented on and included in the packet for council?
Yes, among the first things that happens under the licensing ordinance in the current form, it's going to come to Director Schluto, and she's going to immediately
Like a full site plan
distribute it,
review?
exactly, to get all the relevant input, well, most of the relevant input. As written right now, it does not have a component where it's coming to the Planning Commission at that time. It's strictly an administrative review before the City Council sees it.
So would it be taken up to a point where if City Council were to award a license, the site plan would be ready to come to us? Would it have already gone through multiple staff reviews if that was required? And the plan would be in a format and a manner where staff feels they could recommend approval of the site plan?
But I should clarify something, that the license is not going to be issued before the site plan approval.
Okay.
Okay, that is, the license is going to be the last thing that happens. The council the administration first, and the council is going to pare down the applicants to recommend applicants to the City Council for potential license approval. But before a license is actually in effect, council may pass on but before it's actually issued, it will have to undergo site plan approval. So the license isn't etched in stone before you ever get it.
So can you go through the process, I guess, then?
Now oh gosh.
So somebody, the 14-day thing that's in here about we'll after the 14-day period, we'll accept applications, et cetera, et cetera. Those are all submitted. Say I'm an applicant and now I've submitted it. First, it sounds like it goes to staff, and you guys review it and look at these standards, and I'm assuming prepare some sort of report or memo outlining whether or not it meets the proposed standards and what the points are that would be awarded to a particular application. What happens after that? Does it go to council then, where they say, we think that you qualify for a potential license, and then it comes to us for site plan approval, and then the license gets issued? Is that the procedure?
Page 10.
Mostly, I'm going to ask Dan to come up and help.
If I may very briefly, so I have participated in this process quite extensively. Basically, after our council, they might issue a conditional approval.
Okay.
And that is contingent upon, for the city of Berkeley, which might be site plan approval, but you can't really give a full license out or approval out or a complete license until the state actually comes to the facility, looks at the security, the Bureau of Fire Services conducts the report, it gets a complete okay from the state, and they have a certificate of occupancy from the city of Berkeley, whether that's a temporary one or a full one. Then thereafter, they get the full license after basically they're ready to open the doors.
Do they go back to council for issuance of the full license, or is that considered an administrative function?
No, that's just basically a formality to make sure that the building department and everyone has signed off on it, and the state has signed off on it, whether they've got their pre-qualification, so on and so forth. And they do a site visit.
So it would go to council first for conditional issuance of the license. Is that correct?
Well, it would, and the one step I think you might have glossed over, and it's probably why Dan jumped up, is before it even gets to council, then there's the vetting process by the city manager's office, the city manager, to kind of size up the criteria and so on, to come up with the potential candidates to recommend to the council.
So I guess that kind of leaves me with my original question. When it goes to council for consideration of the conditional issuance of the license, is the site plan at that point completely vetted by staff and ready to go to planning commission should the conditional license be issued?
It should be.
Yeah, I mean, there may always be some things that come up, for instance, when the planning commission gets to it, but I think as far as the city manager would be concerned at that point, before it goes to the council, the site plan is going to be as complete as
Generally there, no major
necessary.
Changes?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Because we'll be looking at making sure part of the merit system is looking at their sufficient parking, making sure it is compatible with the adjacent land uses and compliance with the overall city master plan.
Okay. Thanks. That was a long question, but thank
It's
you.
all right. I'm sorry. I wasn't quite sure what you're driving at.
Mr. Murad?
I think a flow chart as to how this process works would be really useful. Yeah.
No,
Seriously.
I agree. We all agree. But in trying to put this together, and what you're seeing here, you missed like the first 14 iterations of it, and we've gone so many different directions on this. A flow chart is absolutely necessary, but just with all the moving parts, would have been nice to have that ready for you today, but that's a fair thing, and I think we definitely want to have that before the next step, perhaps before your public hearing.
That'd be good, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I would like to see that.
Make sure that's in for the public hearing.
Yeah, might make things much smoother, answer your questions as well as the public's.
Yeah. Yes, Ms.
Okay.
Kempner.
So back to one of Ms. Buckler's questions. What happens if we disagree, like they've gotten their point scores, and we go, actually, there's not enough parking, or we as a body go, we actually don't think it's compatible with the city's master plan? What happens then?
City council's already made the determination that it is.
So what's
by the time they've
coming to us?
By the time they've made their license decision.
So,
Aren't
so
those
they coming
decisions
to us
that
just a
planning
formality
commission is supposed
then?
to be making?
Well,
By
No,
ordinance?
it's for the site plan approval, but when you're
but we have-
talking about,
We're talking about the
If we-
site plan
ask-
approval.
If we
Let's
deny the site plan.
One at a time. Go ahead, Mr. Peters.
Approval, then it goes, then what happens? Then we get another one?
Like if we get 3 at once, we only get 3. If we deny it at our end, but city council's already approved it, then, or conditionally approved it, then
Well,
what
if you
happens?
deny the
Site plan.
site plan approval, that's one of the things their approval would be conditioned upon, is that it successfully makes it through and gains site plan approval. If it doesn't, then that license will be
So then we get,
ineffective and will go no farther until the site plan is remedied or the project is abandoned, and there's another
applicant.
applicant.
It hasn't.
Okay.
Really just like any other project. You
Ms.
deny
Buckler?
the site plan, it doesn't move forward until an acceptable site plan.
Right, but usually we're not conditionally approved for a license before they come to us.
Right, this is a very unique.
That's where I think
So the-
there's confusion.
Yeah, so the effect of the matter is that we could overturn city council, which is, or at least we put it on pause, and I'm pretty sure that's not what they expected, and I know this is substantially different than they saw 2 weeks ago at council, so that's one thing. My other thing is, I really do not understand why we've cut out the labs. I heard there was some comment, I know, from council on that. Why does it all have to be retail that we're doing? And effectively, we're allowing up to 6 retail establishments in 3 locations.
It could be. I
technically.
mean, that's a policy
Tec-
decision.
I
That's not a legal decision. Council
understand,
decided
but-
it wanted to strictly limit the allowable uses to retail, and they wanted to focus, in terms of having a cap, they did not want to cap necessarily the number of licenses, but the number of locations or rooftops, as it's been referred to. And you are right, you could have some stacking of uses at a single location, which could run the number of actual licenses up beyond 3. It could be 6, it
So,
could be more.
and that brings another question. So if we take a retail space that now has to be split in 2, which wasn't intended to be split in 2 originally, but the state licensors, I went through some of their requirements on, separation of cash registers and bookkeeping, and there's a really good blog out there by some attorneys that deal in this quite a bit. So does that then increase their parking? Because now you might have to have 2 full-time people where you would only have 1, or you have to have 4 full-time people where you have 2. You have 2 different guarded entrances versus the 1. So you now have all this staff that's working at a location where you wouldn't have had that before. Do we then have to these are now questions that just keep snowballing in my head about what if, and we are accused that we don't look down the road at all of these things, and all of a sudden we have, 12 people or 8 people working in a place where there's usually 2, and now there's not a parking, and not a parking walk, but I do think these are issues that have to be addressed.
Ms. Schluter, do you want to comment on that? Would medical, if it was a medical and a retail establishment, I assume that's what you're talking about, would we treat it as 2 separate tenant spaces that would need to provide their own parking facilities? Or would it be 1 larger space?
Well, that's not something that we have specifically addressed, but we have built into our ordinance that if there is going to be separate uses in one parcel, then they would have the
Separate entrances.
separate entrances, and they would have shared parking. So very similar to, any other multi-use building. If you're going to have 2 separate uses, you have to accommodate parking for both.
So kind of like the medical and the kinder care that we just looked at?
Exactly. So to your point, Ms. Buckler, the parking requirement for retail and for medical does not take into account the number of employees in each facility. It's based on the usable square foot area.
And just so everyone's aware, under the state rules and the law, you don't actually have to separate the medical supply from the recreational. It can almost be in a separate case. It doesn't have to be in a separate building completely.
I think it's quite possible or likely that you are going to see, they're considered equivalent licenses by the state, but you're going to see entrepreneurs wanting to do both the medical marijuana provisioning center and the adult use retail under the same roof. There are some requirements in the state law, again, about separating separating the display and so on, but there is no requirement that it would have to be like a completely separate facility. You got to go out one door in order to go in. There are some separation requirements, but not to that point of cordoning off one business from the other.
Okay.
It's mostly in the accounting of the packaging, in the transport of the product that the state tracking goes through.
Right.
Okay. Ms. Kempner?
I have one more question that it just kind of popped in my mind. Is there a reason that it almost feels like the process is backwards, right? Like normally what would come to us would be like a special land use and a site plan, and we would approve those, and then they would go to council for the final decision. Is there some specific reason why it wouldn't come to us as a site plan and then that be included in the packet that's given to council?
We are anticipating possibly dozens.
Well, I mean, but you're only going to put finalists in front of council, right?
Okay, but we have to get to that point. We just didn't think it was reasonable to think, say we get 30 applicants, they're all going to go through the whole process, expend a lot of money, develop detailed site plans and so on, when only 3 of those potentially are going to survive. So we needed to kind of flip the process around and to, I guess, try to pare down the numbers, and those are the ones that are going to have to provide the more detailed information that ultimately the City Council and the Planning Commission will see. I know that's not a fully satisfactory answer because we're all trying to figure this out. The same questions that you all are having, we're trying to figure out at the same time, is how is this all going to work? You can't make a decision if you don't have all the information, but you can't expect to have all the information from applicants who don't know whether they're even in the game.
Mr. Richardson?
I'm glad Michelle pointed out items 4 and 5, merit point, the point system criteria, because that kind of jumped out at me as well as another word. Usurpation sounds harsh, but it's infringing on our role to have these particular points decided by staff instead of us. Now, I kind of read this whole thing as cutting the planning commission out of the picture, essentially, and that's not really a bad thing. That's not our role, is to decide whether, there should be marijuana establishments in the city and what criteria should be met to have an establishment in the city. That's not our role. Our role is confined to the physical space and its compatibility with the neighborhood. But these criteria do get into that, and I'm just wondering if you've cross-checked this proposed ordinance with the zoning enabling laws to make sure that you're not getting us into a situation where the law is being violated by making decisions that are committed by law to the Planning Commission. I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying that.
Those are good comments, but we have done that.
All right.
And again, there is a lot of overlap here, overlapping functions where the council has considerable discretion in its licensing decisions, just like it does with liquor licensing, to delve into things that would otherwise, but for the licensing ordinance, would be things that the Planning Commission would be looking at and delving into, and the City Council wouldn't even be involved. But adding that licensing component does lawfully allow council to vet those same types of things. And I said there clearly is some overlap, and to some extent the council will be looking at things and making determinations on some of these more land use planning types of things before the Planning Commission even sees it.
Well, I'm just, you can understand the way you and I think, hey, wait a minute, maybe that's, an illegal decision-making process. You're assuring me it's been looked at, and that's not the case, and I'll
Well, I'm
certainly-
giving you my opinion. It's,
Okay.
it's not that the case, but certainly there could be others who will come up with theories and so
Well,
on
it's just,
to
that's just
challenge,
it,
but-
as we know.
Right.
The disappointed applicant can go to a clever attorney, and there may be arguments that you think are unreasonable on their face, but that doesn't stop people from advancing them.
Understood.
Okay, I'll leave that behind. I think that the concern I had about public notice and about is largely satisfied by this. I don't have a problem with what you've done there. I had an additional concern last time around, which caused me to want to handle this as special land use. And that's the fact that we have no idea how these businesses are actually going to work out. We don't really know, how much traffic there'll be, whether it be short-term traffic or, we don't really know the impacts on the neighborhood. And it just seemed to me that caution dictated that we should handle it as a special use until we get some of that kind of experience and just see. I'm not here to. It's obvious which way council wants to handle this, so I'm not here to stand on that point. I'm just making that observation for you. And I have to kind of laugh looking through this. I mean, the first page says, the ordinance says, all these types of marijuana businesses will be licensed to the extent permissible under state and federal laws. Well, I'm not aware that federal law gives anybody any authority to legalize the sale or distribution of a Schedule I drug. So, I mean, it's just a new thing, a thing in a legal gray area, and I'm not terribly comfortable with kind of the way we're sort of jerry building this approach. As I prefaced my comments, it's not really our call to decide policy-wise. The voters have passed an ordinance advising us to handle it as a legal activity, and I'm not going to hold that process up, but I just wanted to be on the record with my concerns, both legal and policy-wise, and I'm prepared to go ahead with the public hearing personally, but I think what my commissioners have mentioned, along with my own concerns, are something that we're still going to be grappling with after that public hearing.
Mr. Murad?
I'm sitting here listening to the conversation, and we've mentioned, like, alcohol. Why not handle it just like if somebody was getting a license to sell beer and wine and alcohol?
It is largely handled that way.
But we're changing it up.
We don't do special land uses.
Yeah, I understand that.
The council makes a licensing decision without any involvement of the planning
But
commission.
we're also putting in this point system to choose who the applicants are going to be.
That's because we are required to by the state law.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, that's the only reason. There actually were, with medical marijuana, there were some communities that were doing it strictly with a
Lottery.
Lottery and so on.
First come, first served.
The state law, and frankly, I think we may all come to regret it because that's just fertile for litigation, right?
Yeah, that's my concern.
By the state law that was adopted by the voters last November, we are required to have a merit-based scoring system.
Okay.
and we're doing the best we can with it, but undoubtedly, everybody's not going to agree with it, and as hard as we try to make things objective, there will be some element of subjectivity as to how those points land.
Okay.
And that's what lawyers will fight about for
many
the next
years.
decade in the court system.
Yes, Ms. Buckler?
One more question. What happens if one of these closes after a year, so they weren't capitalized well enough, or the 3 opened and there was too much competition, and so they've determined Berkley isn't their home, and they're closing up and going elsewhere, or they bankrupted, or I don't know, whatever happened. If it closes, how does this open back up again? Was there a trigger that there's an annual?
There are provisions. First of all, the licenses aren't
I understand
permanent.
I understand they're good for a
They're
year.
and there are requirements. They have to be in operation. They have to be open. If they go dark, again, it's kind of like with liquor
That wasn't my
licenses.
question. My question is, so one goes dark or doesn't get renewed? Does this process open up again?
Yes.
But it only opens up for the number of licenses that are available?
Correct.
And so I assume that there's something that just notes that.
Yeah, there's a section in here. Let me see if we can get to it.
I missed that. I'm so sorry.
It's more toward the back.
That's not it.
Oops, I think I went.
I don't remember. I didn't remember seeing anything, but then, there's a lot of, it opens back up.
Is it on page 11, letter C?
Yeah, I think I went past.
The license is available due to expiration, so there's an application period. Okay, yes, that's it. Thank you.
Well, what you said, Ms. Butler, is essentially correct. The license isn't gone forever. It can't be. This is a difference from liquor licensing. Our licenses cannot be transferred to another community. They stay in Berkeley. They're non-transferable. So if a business doesn't make it, and frankly, that's one of the reasons, among others, why the council wanted to put the cap on it. I mean, we're all for, market competition and so on, but let's face it, if we let in all comers and there are 30 of them, the chances of there still being 30 viable businesses, or that we want 30 viable businesses in the city of Berkeley, that, with the higher the number, the less likely it is that they'll all survive. That's just the law of natural market competition, and we're trying to avoid that and hopefully come up with the best licensees, and by best I mean that they meet the criteria, not the least of which is viability and sustainability.
Any other comments or questions on this item?
Mr. Chair, my two biggest items last month, I believe, when we talked about this, was the 500 feet, which apparently has been removed at the gateways.
The council wanted that removed, yes.
Okay, and also the public input, or I guess we don't really call it a public hearing, but there's an opportunity for, there's a notification opportunity for neighbors to speak. I
Yeah,
didn't see the
there
term.
will be published notice, and there will be specific notice given to everyone
It's like a zoning.
located within, that was the idea, is to have the same criteria that we would for a zoning
Okay,
hearing. Same
but it doesn't say public hearing in here, but it alludes
Yeah.
to it.
Well, I mean, that may have been an oversight. There wasn't an intention to call it something different. We could certainly call it a public hearing. We could add that to the ordinance language, just to make that crystal clear.
Those are my two biggest bugaboos prior.
Ms. Schluto, do you need a motion for us to set the public hearing?
Yes.
So is there anyone that would like to make that motion, or any additional comments?
Not me, my motion ability is not
Okay.
well tonight.
Someone else, then?
I'll make
Mr. Richardson?
Go ahead, Tim.
So I'll make a motion to set a public hearing for the, I don't know what we
SP.
call this.
ESP.
The zoning ordinance amendment to permit marijuana businesses.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, we'll do that.
Second.
Any other comments? Ms. Shuto, could you call the roll, please?
Do we have to pick a date?
I'm assuming it'd be to the November Planning Commission meeting.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
The next regularly scheduled meeting. Smith,
Yes.
Toronto,
Yes.
Buckler,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Kempner,
Yes.
Murad,
Yes.
Patterson,
Yes.
Richardson,
Yes.
Kapelansky.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you, Commissioners. You made a lot of very thoughtful and insightful comments, gave us a lot of food for thought. We're going to try to work through some of these scenarios, come up with a flow chart, try to streamline the process. I don't mean to cut anybody out, but just to make sure it's smooth and we don't have any internal conflicts or ambiguities.
Thanks.
I do have a question. One of your application criteria is that you have to provide identifying information for all employees. What happens when somebody quits and a new employee comes in? Do they have to supply the same information to the city?
I'm going to have to look at what we say there. I think there is a provision a little deeper in the ordinance that does require them to update any information that is no longer current. They don't have to necessarily do it immediately, but they do have to at some point update that so that we do have fairly current.
I'm referring to item 10 on page 5, name, DOB, address, photo ID, and email for any operator or employee other than the...
I believe that's also a LARA requirement as well.
Yeah, it is.
So, as long
We
as
just
there's a
wanna know
provision
who-
there to
We want to know who we're dealing with.
yeah, to update that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, next up is the Master Plan Steering Committee. Ms. Shuto, do you want to give us a brief overview of that and then also comment on Carlisle's review of the downtown plan?
Yes. So as you are all aware, we're going to be undertaking, updating the master plan. We have retained Carlisle Wortman and Associates to assist us in that effort. I met with Ben Carlisle earlier this afternoon, and we're working out a proposed timeline and scope on when we want to tackle certain things to make sure that we're on track with adoption within the 12 to 18 months that we had originally anticipated. So one component of the master plan process is to engage a master plan steering committee. And so what city staff and I are working on doing is putting together a number of people from various boards, planning commission, zoning board of appeals, city council, and then any other commission or board through the city who would want to sit on such on board. So we're looking at 13 to 15 people, and was wondering who on the planning commission would like to be included, if anyone would like to be included on that committee.
Are you looking for one or two?
One or two. I mean, if there are two people that are desperately want to get on it, that would be great. But if only one, we're not going to force two people to do it. But we want to make sure that we do have a representative from the Planning Commission. There will be a number of presentations that come your way and things of that nature, but at least you have one person that is on the steering committee.
And what would the time commitment be?
Well, we're looking at about 9 meetings, one per month, starting anywhere between December, January of 2020.
Evening meetings?
Probably most likely evening meetings, just because we're looking to also engage high school students, and we'll want to make sure that we don't schedule something that would interfere with their schoolwork.
Do you know which evenings?
We have not narrowed that down yet.
That's a bridge too far.
Not the second Tuesday of the month, I'll tell you that.
So is there anyone who would...
I'd be interested.
Okay.
Me too.
I would be, and I could wear my environmental committee
Oh,
hat.
that's right. Yeah.
If the city would like a representative from that committee.
Recycled. I think that would be a good
Yes.
idea.
So I'm throwing my hat out there. My recycled hat.
Do you have anyone from Environmental Advisory yet?
No, I haven't received any feedback from that committee, so that would work out perfectly.
Okay.
Double duty.
So we have two people who want to do planning commission representation and one from the environmental advisory committee / planning commission.
May I ask another question? If the member is unavailable, can they send an alternate?
I don't see why not.
That's a good question.
Okay.
Well, if we have two,
Yeah.
both
You
of them
could
are
be from the
unavailable.
Environmental committee on it.
Yeah, there might be some time I'd want to send somebody else if I have a conflict or something.
And we'll make sure that, if you pass along any materials that need to be reviewed that day or any questions or concerns that you do have, that would be fine.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Oh, you didn't want to do it?
I've already done that steering committee thing a few times. I'm going to let someone else have a turn.
And then I'll just segue. We did ask, per the Planning Commission's request, we did ask Ben Carlisle to complete a review of the downtown master plan as it was presented to the Planning Commission. They have done a review of that, and throughout our discussion this afternoon, they found that the plan was put together very well. They understand that there were some concerns about some of the parking concerns, as well as any future plans for the road diet. But all in all, they agreed with the majority of things that were presented. Their position on the master plan is they're not going to be doing the same work or doing the same study area. Their intent is to take some of the initiatives that were proposed in the downtown master plan and try to incorporate them or expand upon them community-wide. So things that would be proposed or things that were discussed in the downtown area on how that would affect the adjacent residential uses, and then feed into how any initiatives in the downtown plan could then be incorporated into the 11-mile corridor, 12-mile corridor, or not 12-mile, Woodward corridor.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on the master plan? No? Okay, liaison reports. Does anyone have anything to report from their various committees?
I do.
Mr. Murad.
Chamber has the state of the city. It's this Friday morning at Farina's. 8 o'clock event is like breakfast, and then it'll start at about 8:45, 8:30 or 8:45. Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
Okay. Anyone else?
For environmental, the Environmental Committee, in conjunction with the City DBW Department and the South Oakland County Resource Recovery Authority, is sponsoring an electronics recycling day this coming Saturday, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. in the community center parking lot. This is not a hazardous waste event, so please don't bring batteries or anything of that sort, but old electronic junk, TVs and all that stuff that piles up at your house, we will take it off your hands. There's been a lot of publicity lately about recycling markets, and I just wanted to also note that Sakura has contracts with has a contract with a company to take this sort of waste, and in turn that company uses only processors that are located in North America to recycle the e-waste. So this waste is not going to China, and it's not going to end up in a landfill. It'll be genuinely recycled. So this is a golden opportunity for a lot of people, so I hope we'll see you out there.
Great. Yeah.
Parks and Rec, I wasn't able to make the meeting, but there is their Boo Fest on Monday, October 28th, starts at 5 p.m., and the tickets are available online.
Great.
Regarding DDA, I am following up by continuing missing of the meetings due to work-related items. So I apologize to the DDA. Natalie, I knew you were there. If there's anything you want to bring up, unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to even keep up with it, so I've been very bad on that aspect.
Yeah, why not?
So I attended the last CDA meeting as the chair of the Citizens Engagement Advisory Committee in that role. And the focus of the meeting was the DDA was presented with a candidate to be the new director. He stepped out, and then they decided to offer him the contract and came back, and I met him. He's fantastic. I'm very glad that he is taking them up on their offer and looking forward to working with him from the Citizens Engagement Advisory perspective.
Sorry to put you on the spot, but I appreciate it.
Okay, that worked out. Anyone else? No? I had one question. The council, there was an item about RRC on there. Where are we with RRC?
We are still engaged, and we're working through the checklist and their recommendations.
Okay.
The master plan update is a big component of that. So once we start getting movement and moving forward on that, we can start incorporating some of the other recommendations.
Okay. All right, if there's nothing else, does anyone have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Yes.
Public comment?
Mr. Smith?
Commissioner comments. I just have one, it's the same one, Holly Market update.
I've actually spoken with the property owner there, and he has put the property up for sale. So there's going to be a possible new tenant in there. We're trying to work it through and see where he's, when that might be moving forward. But it is a conditional purchase agreement on how some of the marijuana stuff works out. So definitely.
Okay. I just want to make a statement that, again, the vinyl siding is unacceptable, and in our business district and so on, and we all know that. The wrong answer will be to let it slide, because that sets a precedent for the next guy to put it up and ask forgiveness. So, that's it. That's the wrong answer. I mean, I'm not saying you had that answer, but it's got to be resolved.
I agree.
I'll keep asking. I'll have something else to talk about.
It's one of those kind of situations where something was done previously, and he's trying to he wants to rectify it. He has a purchase agreement on that property. So if someone else is going to be buying it, he doesn't want to be putting in a lot of time and money. That's something that will be rectified shortly. If that purchase agreement falls through, then he and I have discussed, and we are going to be working to remedy it, and he's aware of that.
Thank you.
So didn't he put the siding up without a permit?
Yes.
He did.
So hasn't he been fined for that?
I believe he has, yes.
I must say, in my travels around town, I get more questions about that Holly Market than any other issue right now. It more than La Salette, more than anything else, is that market. So it's on people's minds. I just have a quick comment. We have grappled mightily with the issue of the marijuana ordinances, and I'm very surprised that we don't have more people at our meetings, and there hasn't been more public comment and more pro and con about this in the community. This does not seem to be an issue that the community is really engaged on, and that's just an observation on my part. I don't know why that is, but we are very concerned up here to do it right, and this is one of those things where we don't seem to be getting a whole lot of pressure from either direction. I'm puzzled by that. I just wonder if I'm the only one that feels that way.
I have something too.
Yes.
What happened to La Salette?
La Salette is working through some engineering site issues right now, so the site plan is still in flux. We're hoping to have them on the November agenda.
Okay, because they set themselves a deadline of December 31st.
They extended their, with city councils, they had extended their
Okay.
deadline in anticipation of this. They're hoping to get everything worked out, but the engineering issues that they are incurring are substantial, and there's something that we didn't want to bring before Planning Commission if it affected the site, and then it would have to come back again.
Thank
So
you.
Okay,
we're trying
thank
to
you.
do those at the front.
All right, thank you.
That is the right answer.
Any motions?
Motion to adjourn?
All in favor?
Aye.
Adjourn.